and welcome to tonight's forum. I'm Janet Ott, representing the League of Women Voters of Bellingham and Whatcom County, and I will be your moderator tonight. Founded in 1920, the League is a nonpartisan organization with more than 700 affiliates in all 50 states. Our goals are to encourage informed and active participation in government, increase an understanding of major public policy issues, and influence public policy through education and advocacy. The League never endorses candidates or political parties. Membership is open to all people age 16 and older, and we invite you to join us. Tonight's forum is being broadcast in the BTV and the City of Bellingham YouTube channel. Recordings of this program will be available on the League of Women Voters of Bellingham-Whatcom County website and at the City of Bellingham YouTube channel. The forum will be rebroadcast on BTV and 102.3 KMRE Community Radio up through Election Day on November 8th. No portion of this forum may be rebroadcast in part or in full without the written consent of the League of Women Voters. Questions for this forum have been prepared in advance by the League with input from the public. The Cascadia Daily News, the Linden Tribune, the Salish Current, the Northern Light, and 102.3 KMRE Community Radio are media partners. Tonight, we're hosting candidates for the Washington State 42nd Legislative District, Representative Position 1. The Washington State House of Representatives has 98 members. 2 are elected from each of the districts in the state. During legislative sessions, the legislature is called upon to enact or reject legislation affecting public policy in the state, provide for the levy and collection of taxes and other revenue to support state government and assist local government, and appropriate funds for these purposes. Although laws are enacted only when the legislature is convened in formal session, policy issues and the general operation of state and local government are under continuous review by legislators who serve on permanent and interim study committees. Washington State representatives serve 2-year terms, and their annual salary is $57,876. So I'd like to now introduce and welcome the candidates. Alicia and Tawsha Dykstra Thompson. Here are the rules we're going to be following tonight. There will be no formal opening statements by the candidates. The introductory question is tailored to elicit responses consistent with opening statements. Candidates will have 90 seconds to respond to each question. Each candidate will give a 1-minute closing statement. Each candidate has a challenge card that they can use once. The challenger has 30 seconds to state their challenge. The challenged candidate then has 30 seconds to respond. I will ask candidates to speak in alphabetical order and alternate order for the remaining questions. The timer displayed on the screen will count down the time. The timer will be purple when the candidate begins, then turn to yellow when 15 seconds remain. When time is up, the timer will turn red. If you continue to speak after the time limit, I will cut you off. Are there questions from the candidates regarding any of the rules? Okay, if our timer's ready, we're going to start. So the opening question and candidate rule. The opening question is, what are the most important challenges facing our state, and how do you propose to address them? The response, please.
Yes, thank you. We have a number of challenges that we need to address all at the same time. And it doesn't take any time at all to take a step outside your front door and probably see most of them quite visibly. We are up against crime in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. Public safety is a primary challenge, but we also have intertwined with that mental health crisis. We have homelessness, and we have an addiction crisis on our hands. This is something that has been ongoing and has gotten significantly worse, and we need to be able to address it right away. I look forward to continuing the work I started, and we also have to know that amidst all this crisis, we do need to continue legislating over a wide variety of topics of ongoing concern as well, and we have to do that all at the same time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
Yes, thank you for the question. Definitely one of the top challenges and concerns that we are facing in our communities is public safety. And it is a broad issue, as Rep. Rule alluded to, because there's the element of crime, there's the element of addiction that is driving the crime, the element of homelessness and mental health that's driving those all. So it's a very complex issue. It's one that I've been working on and through my years of service with the Bellingham Police Department. I worked hand in hand as a bicycle officer with the homeless community on a lot of different issues. And so there is no one answer that will solve all these things. In addition to that, we're looking at a crisis with the cost of living and housing affordability in our community. A lot of people cannot afford to live here anymore, and they're trying to figure out even how to continue putting food on the tables. The average family is spending $600 more per month than they were last year on the essentials that are necessary. And so we need to find realistic solutions for finding ways to make life here more affordable for our families, so Whatcom County and the residents in it can continue to thrive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So this question number 2, what legislation would you support to mitigate the effects of drought, flooding, and rising sea levels in the district? And we'll start with you, candidate Thompson. Your response, please.
Legislation that I would support. Well, I think what we need to focus on is how do we're not going to necessarily be able to stop these things from occurring. So how can we protect our communities when they do occur? And how do we do that? Building those essential infrastructures, things such as when the flooding occurs. We had a catastrophe here, and it's not directly related, or it has not been directly tied to just the climate change issue, but it is going to continue to occur. And so how do we do a better job of controlling the river and protecting the communities? And that is going through flood mitigation and management. And it's going to be not just one answer. There's no one answer for all of these things. And so I think we need to be creative. We need to look at regulation that impacts our ability to have creative solutions to these issues for better infrastructure to protect our communities. So, for example, the side channel that has been done this year to try and help with some of the flood mitigation, the fact that it costs $80,000 in permitting for an $8,000 project is something that keeps butting up against when we're trying to find solutions, is the over-regulation of items costing entirely too much to fix those things. It's cost prohibitive. So we need to do a better job on those things.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rule, your response, please.
Yes, thank you. It's going to take a lot of things at the same time. One of the things I know for sure is that we don't have enough time to do just one thing to mitigate some of the climate impacts that we're seeing. One of the things I'm really proud of is that I was able to get an entire bill passed for outdoor education. And when we teach our children about the outdoors and nature and the science around it, they teach their parents, and together they learn. And when they fall in love with nature, they are then very, very attached to it, and they're able to protect it and to take care of it. And they do that by also, they talk to their parents about it. So I'm really proud of that legislation. I think that's one forward-looking way that we can continue to steward our outdoors. But meanwhile, we need to do a lot of other things as well. We need to work at the same time doing a lot of creative and innovating work and incentivizing work around alternative fuels. We need to look at ways to continue protecting our salmon, keeping our rivers cold and the habitat protected. Thank you.
Thank you. So question number 3. If elected, what efforts would you support to protect public safety? And we'll start with you, candidate Rule.
Yes, well, what I'd really like to do is continue going forward with many of the things I've already started. I was very proud to support law enforcement in the last 2 years as your legislator. And I did that because I know that everybody in our community deserves to be safe. And in order to do that, we've got to make sure that we have good laws that protect people. I've been working as a social worker for my whole professional life. And during that time, I have really been committed to keeping victims taken care of and preventing victims from becoming victims. So I want to continue doing that by supporting our law enforcement. I do think that we need to continue to educate them and to make sure that we're using incentives to make sure that we've got enough staffing. That is really important. And also to improve the laws that will impact our day-to-day lives and keep us safe here in Washington State. So I did work really hard on a lot of these things in the last couple of sessions and made some progress. Some of the things that I worked on didn't get over the finish line. One of the things that was really specifically close was a particular bill on the ability to pursue. And that's something that I would like to see through in my next term as your legislator. We only lost that by 1 vote in the Senate. I am confident that we can get that across this time with some work. I do think that the most important thing we can do is work on public safety hand in hand with the other systems that are broken. So we need to work with both mental health and law enforcement at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
Yes, public safety obviously is one of my top concerns coming into, and a big reason why I'm running is because as a police officer for 25 years, this is my area of expertise. And I also had to work and learn to acclimate or accommodate the new legislation that came out over the 2 years and how to work with that. And so I have some creative ideas on how to move forward. The pursuit policy, for one, back in early 2000, for example, I pursued some bank robbers that had just robbed a bank and had been doing a series of bank robberies. I did it on reasonable suspicion. I didn't have probable cause. So thinking back to that particular incident, I wouldn't be able to do that today. And so, but on the state level, the big thing is what the message that was received by police officers is that our current leadership does not trust our current law enforcement community and to not have that trust. And so that is why I need to be down there, is because I will have our law enforcement officers back. I've been there, I've sat in that patrol car, I've worked these streets in the middle of the night. And so I know the tools that are needed and the trust that is needed. Our laws need to be clear and concise. We're making life and death decisions in 2.5 seconds. And so we need to have a clear, concise laws for them to follow and be getting it right.
Okay, thank you. So question number 4, if elected, what next steps, if any, would you support for Washington State after the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health decision overturning Roe versus Wade regarding women's reproductive health? Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
So what laws would I support?
If any, what next steps, if any, would you support?
Well, Roe v. Wade the overturning with Dobbs does not impact Washington State as far as the abortion issue is concerned, because it was codified into law through the initiative process, not once, but twice. And so abortion in this state is not going to be impacted. Some people have asked that if I would support choice and up until birth and partial birth abortions. I would not support that. But I also think that continuing to have this conversation, because it's an initiative issue and it's been decided by the people, I will support the will of the people. This is what I've done. As a intel detective, one of my primary jobs was threat assessment and site security for high-risk targets. So I worked collaboratively with the Planned Parenthood for site security, and I worked with their security people, and I've been able to work collaboratively across the aisle with anyone and everybody in the course of my duties, and I would continue to do so.
Okay, thank you. So you want to challenge candidate Rule? You want to challenge her? Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to know, do I ask her directly?
Yes.
Yeah. Candidate Thompson, I'd like to know how you'd vote if a pro-choice bill was in front of you in the legislature like it has been for almost every year in Washington state.
Well, what's the details of the bill? That's the problem. When you're asking me to vote on a bill, I just said if it was a bill that said I would support abortion up until point of birth or partial birth abortions, I would not support that. But if you're asking me if I support a bill that takes away the rights of a rape victim or a mother who has to make that choice between herself or her child, I'm not going to vote against that as well. I've sat with rape victims. I've investigated incest cases where the child became pregnant. I have never gotten in their way. I would never invoke that trauma and say that I'm going to trauma and put my will upon them on that as well. So.
Okay, thank you. So Candidate Rule, your response to question 4 regarding next steps for Washington State after the overturning Roe versus Wade.
Would you please repeat the original question?
Yeah, I will.
Thank you.
If elected, what next steps, if any, would you support for Washington State after the Dobbs versus Jackson women's health decision overturning Roe versus Wade regarding women's reproductive health?
Thank you. I think we have an obligation to protect women's reproductive health and women's decision for everything because it's a fundamental right. So I think we need to do that in whatever way it proposes, as it has in Washington State many, many times and often out of our district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So question number 5. The Nonpartisan Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy has rated the Washington State tax structure as the most regressive in the country. What, if any, changes would you support to Washington tax structure if elected? Candidate Rule, your response, please.
Thank you. One of the things, well, actually 2 things that I worked on this last session were directly related to tax relief for the people who live here. I did work on a sales tax holiday that we were able to pass out of the House, and that would have given some direct relief at some of the difficult times in, September when we're going back to school. So it'd been a little bit easier to make some of those harder to make purchases and back to school supplies. Would love to see any sort of tax relief in that way. Wasn't able to get it across this time, but I think we need to keep moving forward with some direct tax relief. I also worked really hard on that B&O tax relief, and that one is just something that's near and dear to my heart because with my work directly with small businesses, whether it be on the Blaine City Council or as a small business owner myself, I know how hard it is in those first startup times for our small businesses to pay tax on gross receipts. So I plan to continue to do that work in that space to expand the B&O tax relief. It's really important to me that the folks that are paying B&O tax in their small businesses have less of a disproportionate stress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
So I think that we had an amazing opportunity this last session to make meaningful tax reform with a $15 billion surplus. And unfortunately, there were no tax reforms that were made. There were no tax holidays that were given. And in fact, the bill included several new fee increases that we are all feeling the impacts of if you're having to renew your license or your tabs. And so I would like to see definitely some opportunity. We have another, looks like a projected budget surplus coming up in the next session. And I would like to work collaboratively with people. I am not a budget person or an economics person. So I would lean on those that have the expertise in that to find the best way to have meaningful tax relief. I would look at one of the top ones I would like to do, especially with the housing affordability issue that we are facing here in this community, is property tax. No property tax relief for the first $250,000 on your property taxes, especially now. I know I just got my tax assessment and the bill in my house has gone up $100,000. And so I know that I'm going to be paying significantly more in taxes. And so I think a property tax is across the board a good one that will impact lots of people in our community.
Okay, thank you. So question number 6. What changes, if any, to the gun safety laws in Washington state would you oppose or support? And we'll start, candidate Thompson, your response, please.
I'm sorry, one more time with the question. I'm not sure I understood.
What changes, if any, to the gun safety laws in Washington state would you oppose or support?
So gun safety, we have one of the most restrictive gun safety laws here in Washington state, and our actual constitution is actually a slightly freer constitutional right than the constitutional rights guaranteed by the federal government. And so any laws and changes to the laws that are currently impacted, I would assess them next to our constitutional freedoms guaranteed by our Washington state constitution and the federal government. Unfortunately, our government has on a few occasions made legislation that directly is in contrast with what our constitution says. And so evaluating moving forward any gun safety or any gun regulations, our constitution guarantees the right to firearms and to bear arms. And so we need to be very conscientious that any gun laws that have been passed or in the future are supportive of our constitutional rights.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rule, your response, please.
Yes, I'm really proud of a couple of very common sense gun laws that I supported this last session. I come from a family of gun owners, and I think that it's perfectly within our freedoms and rights to own guns. I do think, though, that there is a crossing when we talk about safety for our children in schools, and I'm really concerned as a mother for keeping our kids safe, whether that be on the streets, but especially in a mass shooting situation. So that's why I felt comfortable with those particular ones, and especially the ones that the untraceable ghost guns, where law enforcement did ask us to support that. So I feel proud of those votes. I also think that we have further work to do, and particularly I'm concerned with a lot of the illegal guns that are out on our streets and in the hands of people who don't have them registered to them and people who are dangerous. So one of the things we can actually do is to support law enforcement doing their jobs and getting those guns off the streets. And that's something that I'm committed to doing. Lastly, I will speak, in addition to this, we need to do a better job of keeping our kids safe in schools. And that means being smarter about paying attention when kids give us some pretty clear indicators that they are a threat for doing shootings, and just checking in with them on their mental health and making sure that we're removing guns from those particular children and youth and make sure they don't have access to those.
Thank you. Question number 7. Even before the pandemic, much of Washington was considered to be a child care desert, especially for infant and toddler care. What is your plan for growing or developing child care to meet our community's needs? Candidate Rule, your response, please.
Yes, I have been serving on the Capital Budget Committee, and that's a place that I can continue to advocate strongly for building the buildings of childcare. But I also think, as somebody who's been serving as the vice chair of the Children, Youth, and Families Committee, that we need to continue working on accessibility to childcare, and that's especially true in our rural areas like ours. One of the things I've been a strong advocate for is ensuring that we have a variety of choices in childcare options. And that's especially important to us that don't necessarily need large institutional type of childcare settings, but we really need to have access closer to our homes. So places like where I live in Blaine, or where other folks might live that are outside of town, that they can use a family center and have somebody who can watch their kids and feel really safe and secure, but is close to their home as well. So I think that there's plenty of space for us to continue building out, and I can't wait to continue doing some of the work I've already started.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to see some assessment and overhaul of the regulations impacting in-home daycare facilities. I've had 2 people close to me, a good friend who actually was watching my child until the people came in and they overregulated her house and she just had to shut down. And same with my cousin. She built out our house extensively to have an in-home daycare. And the regulations were so stringent and ever changing that was unaffordable for her to keep up doing the business. So I think we need to take a hard look at the regulations that negatively impact accessibility of people that are wanting to have an in-home daycare, so that maybe they have their own children and they want to stay home with their kids and they're willing to help watch other people's children at the same time. And so I think I see throughout government, there's a lot of overregulation of a lot of things. And this is one area that I know, because it's impacted my friends and family who have tried to do these things, that we can do better so that people can have more options, because they can do them in their house anywhere throughout the county.
Okay, thank you. Question number 8. Federal funds have recently become available for improvements to infrastructure. What are your top priorities for use of these funds in your district? Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
Well, I think the number one thing that I'm hearing at the door for a lot of people is internet and broadband. I know that there's been some good work that has been started on that, and I will support any work continuing and moving forward. There's, I think with the lockdowns and everybody moving remotely, the lack of internet was felt more severely by those not within urban areas and have less access. And so continuing access for good internet and broadband services. We also need to continue working on our roads and potholes, being able to move freely without damage to our vehicles. I have a road that I drive with my school bus. I'm a sub-school bus driver as well. And there's one road that the kids like it because they bounce all over the bus, but it's not necessarily good for the underside of the bus, the undercarriage. And so we need to work on improving our road, basic road potholes and maintaining good roads and services here. Obviously, infrastructure for floodwater. Culverts are a big way if we have good culvert system for housing. And there's a little bit of over-regulation on that could help with some of the flooding issues when water is backed up at the river, where areas that don't normally flood but are flooding because our ditches and culverts are not well maintained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Rule, your response, please.
Thank you. I would say one of the most important things we can do when we look at federal funding is look at ways that we can match it with state funding as well as local funding and maybe for-profit and nonprofits to maximize the impact in our community. So I'm always looking for that sort of practical, pragmatic approach to bringing that money and maximizing its impact in our neighborhoods and in our backyards. But with that specifically, I really am getting quite concerned about our roads and bridges. They really do need to have significant work. I've been working directly with the Department of Emergency Management, our state military department, and it's clear to me that we need to prioritize some really proactive safety for particularly our bridges. A lot of the work I work with them on is around emergency preparedness. And as we look forward into some of the potential disasters that we're at risk for, which is quite a few in Washington state, we're at one of the highest risk states for natural disasters, as well as the potential of a large earthquake. So we need to be looking at that from a safety perspective, and I agree from a comfort perspective as well. But we also need to be looking at expanding our infrastructure for alternative fuels, for electricity, and for some other really pragmatic sort of things that we can do to move forward with clean, green options for us to reduce fossil fuels in a way that's not so expensive.
Okay, thank you. So this is the last question. So what do you think are the best opportunities for economic development and job creation in your district? Candidate Rule, your response, please.
I just want to say this is one of my very favorite topics and something that I very much enjoy working on, because as a social worker and as somebody who lives here and really works from paycheck to paycheck, it's important to me that we provide every opportunity for every person in Whatcom County to thrive. So I am looking at ways to continue supporting our small businesses. I've worked very hard on the Main Street program that does exactly that, uses state dollars along sandwiched with other local and other dollars to give back money right here in our district. I also think that supporting union wage jobs is really important for taking care of our families and giving them opportunity. I think that we need to support all of our industries that are nearby. I think we need to work on continuing to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind, and we're moving forward with sustainable futures that do well for both our pocketbook and for our future of our kids' health and our kids' enjoyment of our planet.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Thompson, your response, please.
Can you, one more time with a question?
Yes, what do you think are the best opportunities for economic development and job creation in your district?
I think that the best way to job creation and economic development is nurturing apprenticeship programs through our schools, high schools in particular. I've been endorsed by Associated General Contractors that have a core a program that teaches the trades to high school students, and they get school credit for it. So I think, and it allows them to have a working learning from experts, so that when they graduate from high school, they already have the skills necessary to join the workforce in the trades. You know, promoting college is great, but it doesn't work for every student. For example, my brother, I have 10 of them, 10 brothers and sisters. So one of them, he just didn't thrive in high school. It was a struggle every day for him to get through school. And we got him through it with a D- average, but he went down to HVAC school and he was valedictorian. And a lot of students, we need to focus on job skills that we know that they're getting, maybe some testing similar to an ASVAB test that you go for the military to find what their skill set is, and focus our high school training on those skill sets so they join the workforce as soon as they graduate with the skills necessary to succeed.
Okay, thank you. So candidates, it's now time for your 1-minute closing statement. So candidate Rule, your closing statement, please.
Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for engaging in our democracy at a very local level, and thank you for hosting this forum. I have been supported by very unlikely allies in this race. And the reason I've been trusted by them is because I've worked hard to serve you in the 42nd District and in Washington State with exactly what I think will best meet your needs. I listen deeply to you, and I do that because it's important to me to come to this work with service first. That is my primary goal, to represent your values and your needs in your day-to-day life. I have been endorsed and trusted by both law enforcement and mental health, by business organizations like Association of Washington Business, as well as nearly every labor union. I have been supported by very unlikely candidates as organizations, as well as folks in our neighborhood. And that's because I listen carefully, I listen deeply, and I serve you to the very best of my ability. And I look forward to doing that. I look forward to working on mental health, to continue growing those opportunities for our skills centers and our trade-based learning, as well.
Bring it to a close, please.
Okay, as well as being able to support our kids in K through 12 education. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Thompson, your closing statement, please.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to introduce myself and some of my thoughts and ideas if I'm elected down into Olympia. I believe the experience and talents I developed in my 25 years as a law enforcement officer are very applicable to the skills necessary to be successful in Olympia. My skills are collaboration and teamwork, ability to read and write or interpret, apply law and policy, and ability to communicate effectively with people from all walks of life. Throughout my career, no matter what group or committee I was working with, it has never been about political affiliation, but rather what is the common goal. To find what unites us versus what divides us. And that diversity in thought prevents tunnel vision, because tunnels, no matter if they're red or they are blue, can be negative because there's only one way in or one way out. Being a representative is a very complex thing. There's a lot of moving parts. And I've been very successful in working with all types of people. And I also have been endorsed by many, many different groups, including housing affordability, Associated General Contractors, and many law enforcement people and agencies. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, on behalf of the League of Women Voters, I want to thank both candidates for being here today, and I especially thank you for your courage and passion and interest in running for public office. Voters can find more information about the candidates online at vote411.org and in your voter pamphlet. Ballots will be mailed October 19th, 2022. Your ballot must be postmarked or in a ballot drop box before 8 p.m. on November 8th. Please remember to sign the ballot envelope, and if mailing by postal service, we recommend that you mail early. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.